Hey, this is Andrew Laird, and I get to talk with you guys today about being faithful without ceasing, especially during these times right now. So I'm going to dig right into the passage here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, 16 through 18, which says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." So Paul says right here, to be joyful and thankful in all circumstances. And one might question, how's that even possible? Well, before I get into that, I'm going to go into a little bit of a background story with this passage here in 1 Thessalonians, because I've noticed whenever you go deeper and look into context into a passage, you get to really uncover more so the power behind, just a single part of it. So the gist of what happens here in, this first book of, Thessalonians, first letter rather, is that, a lot of the church was under intense persecution. It was a church plant made by the Apostle Paul, and then they're under a lot of persecution because the Roman government feels they're not loyal to Caesar, but they're loyal to this King Jesus. So things end up going complete haywire. Riots start happening, and then Paul has to leave for his life's sake, and then he writes this as a letter of encouragement, and then also following up and seeing how they're doing, and hears back from Timothy, one of his partners in ministry, and he hears from him saying that, hey, we are very, very joyful. We are doing great right now, even in the midst of all these things that are happening right now. Now, even in the midst of all that, there's still some questions that they have, which, is only natural sometimes for, our human condition, and they're seeing all their brothers and sisters dying for Christ, and questions start coming up saying, hey, what's going to happen, to us? What's our fate? Especially, what do we get to look forward to with the return of Jesus? And Paul addresses them saying that, those who have died in Christ will rise in him as well. And when Jesus comes, he's going to be establishing his heavenly kingdom here on earth, and he's going to be greeted and welcomed by his people for that as well, and people are going to notice what's happening. And what also happens here is that a lot of the earthly sense of security and peace, so to speak, which in this case was the Roman government, a lot of those things are going to be completely taken away. And when I looked at that and thought of today's times, we have a lot of things in our world right now that give us a sense of peace and security where they've been taken away from us. Some of us, we feel peace watching major sports which have been taken away, and going to certain places for entertainment, which some of the things we can't do anymore. Cinemas have been shut down, and for some of you, some of you might not be able to get as much of any sort of income whatsoever, and maybe that's the case for your families as well, where a lot of these things are being taken away. But what we see here in the midst of now, and even in the midst of them, that our dependence on God becomes much, much stronger in situations where our backs are really against the wall, where intense circumstances and intense persecution comes, and also we acknowledge more so of our dependence on him when even all these things are taken away too, where all these things that we worship are taken away. The gospel of Jesus Christ still remains no matter what. It is always going to be there. It is never going to change whatsoever. So, and Paul's talking about, again, that day of the Lord where, hey, we get to look forward to what Jesus is going to be bringing, but then he gives these instructions, which is a part of, what I read from, verses 12 up until the end of chapter 5, as some instructions of how to be able to live presently as if that day of the Lord is near, and things we can do now to be able to look forward to that eager expectation that we get to have to be with Jesus, and also, that eager expectation of how he is going to deliver us during these times as well. So the hope of Jesus' return and the hope of Jesus restoring his kingdom should be a major motivating factor for all of us. I remember a college friend of mine named Michael, where he was a super, super overly happy guy, and we were on this retreat for our campus ministry, and there's one person that was there where he was, not having the best of times whatsoever. And he just asked, dude, why are you so happy? And Michael just said, well, I have a relationship with Jesus. And based out of, what he's delivered me out of, and also the eager expectation I have to look forward to, how can I not be joyful? And what do I have to lose, really? So following Jesus is a very, very countercultural way of life, because it responds with love and motivation of hope. And in the midst of the times we're in right now, again, going back to this passage, to find ways to be joyful, because we have that eager expectation of how God is going to make a big thing happen amongst all the things that are happening with the coronavirus, and to come to him in prayer to praise for what's going to be happening, but then also acknowledge that dependence that we need on him right now, because again, when all these things are gone, he is always going to be there for us, and to give thanks amongst all these circumstances that we're in right now. Be thankful for things that we have, thankful that he has given us for provision right now. And we can also be thankful for that hope that's found in the gospel, that we can constantly be always putting our solid rock on during this time. And again, having that eager expectation of what Jesus is going to do for not only us, but for his kingdom amongst all of this that's happening. I believe God is going to work something major out of all of these things that are going on. And my challenge to you guys is on how to be faithful without ceasing, to remember that message of the gospel, that hope of the gospel, and then also being able to put your solid foundation in on that, and have that eager expectation of the day of the Lord and how he's going to be making so much good out of all this. We can't necessarily make sense of what's going to happen, but when we look back on that journey, we can see his hand amongst all this. Thank you guys, and God bless.